The Game Boy Advance, the first console I ever owned and one of my favorite handhelds of all time. I got into gaming a little later in my life than some others, and this is actually my original GBA from the early 2000s, and it kinda shows. But even after all these years, I still love this design. It's compact, powerful, and offers a great selection of games with full backwards compatibility. And with larger hands, I actually find it a bit more comfortable than its successor, the GBA SP. So when I saw the Anbernic RG34XX being promoted all over YouTube as the premier way to experience Game Boy Advance in the modern era, and a nearly one-to-one recreation of the original design, with the only downside being maybe it's a little too faithful, I knew I had to pick one up to try it. This is my first Anbernic handheld, so I'm not as bored of this XX line as others are, but after taking a few weeks to use this, as a self-proclaimed classic GBA nerd, I think there are a few smaller details that other reviewers may have missed. So I'm not doing a normal review. Instead, treat this as supplemental details to the existing coverage. This is just extra stuff that most people won't really care about anyway. First, let's get the pointless nitpicks out of the way. Even discounting the screen size and stealthy extra buttons, this is not in fact the one-to-one GBA replica. We get some nice modern additions, such as a power button instead of a switch, USB-C for charging accessories but no dock support. We also have a springy multi-position volume switch rather than a wheel. And I kinda like this change because with the menu button, you can actually use this to adjust the brightness in-game. The menu button is hidden way up here, and it's mainly used for hotkeys. We also have a reset button for if your game freezes. And back here where the cartridge would go, we have L2 and R2 for playing PS1 games. Or these can also be set up for fast forward or other things. My fingers often rest here, but I don't find myself hitting them by accident due to how stiff they are. And finally, we have mini HDMI for video out, but we'll talk more about that later. As for how the buttons operate, again, it's very close to the original, however the shoulder buttons seem to have a different pivot point, and the shift leads to more of a gap near the top when the button's pressed. And the D-pad has far less play now. While it did still feel pretty good overall, I found it to be a little bit too sensitive, leading to a few annoying moments where I'd get accidental diagonals. It was hard to catch on camera, so I'll just have to stimulate it a bit. Apparently this is a bit of a known issue with some Anbernic handhelds. It's nowhere near as bad as the Switch Pro controller's D-pad, so if you're fine with that, there's no way this thing will bother you. I'd argue most people won't even notice it, but I still found it pretty annoying. And I'm sure it's not just my thumb placement, as I've never had any of these issues on a real GBA, even with aftermarket buttons. So the original D-pad feel and response is really something I wish Anbernic would have put more time into recreating. Luckily, if you're comfortable opening your unit, it's pretty easy to fix. With a bit of tape, the D-pad felt pretty much perfect. Let's move on to face buttons. Because of the addition of X and Y, the main A and B buttons are moved down a tad. It's a very small amount, and it's very hard to tell when looking at both consoles even side by side, but it becomes a little bit more noticeable when you take the protective cover from the RG34XX and line it up with a real GBA. From here you can tell the select and start buttons are moved too. For most people this is probably fine, and I can't think of any other way they could accommodate the extra buttons, but it does make it a little bit more uncomfortable than a real GBA for my longer fingers, as they're now forced to be at a noticeably sharper angle. This is true for start and select as well, but luckily a friend of mine recently got me into 3D printing, so I was able to find a grip online that really helped make this more comfortable. So that's enough about hardware, let's talk about some of the software. I played around with Anbernic's own OS for a bit, but I didn't really like it. It felt kind of clunky and unintuitive, and the default emulators were also kind of bad. So don't even bother with the game room section, that's full of all the default emulators that seem to both look and perform worse than the RetroArch versions in the RA game menu. If you stick to just playing games through RetroArch, the experience is pretty serviceable, and you'll still have access to the typical RetroArch settings, and you can still quick sleep and wake with a tap of a power button. But I still wanted something a little bit better, so I went with the community recommendation of Nulli OS. It's based on Batocera and offers a ton of features without overcomplicating things. Its menu feels a little bit easier to navigate, and just a few clicks away you can enable many other modern features, like retro achievements, easy downloading of game art, sync thing for cloud saves, and a quick resume style feature where you can hop back into your game right where you left off, and much more. There's tons of other OSs out there you can try, but I'm pretty happy with this one. One of the main features I was excited for was HDMI out. Paired with a Bluetooth or wired controller, I was kind of expecting it to work like a Switch or Steam Deck, but it felt a little more limited on Nulli. All you need is a mini to full-size HDMI converter, and it should show up on your screen. However, this does not seem to support hot plugging, so if you're in a game, it won't work. You'll need to go back to the main menu to connect to your display. Same for exiting HDMI mode. You can't do it while in game, you need to back out to the main menu, then unplug. It's a little annoying, but not a huge deal. From there, you can keep playing using the built-in controls, but you'll probably want to pair up a controller. Auto pairing didn't seem to work for me, but I was able to connect to this controller manually. From there, I was able to navigate the menus and even play games. However, things got a little weird when I tried to use a controller over USB. Nulli refused to make this player 1, even following the same process I could only control a second slot. So I figured, okay, I'll just make my Bluetooth controller player 1. But nope, it's still using the built-in controls. And since Nulli is a port of Batocera, my frustrations with how players are managed there return. There's no way to easily or manually assign player slots like on Switch or Steam Deck, aside from messing around in RetroArch settings for each and every game. But these settings are temporary and get reset every time you play a new game. But even if you do manage to get this all set up, player 1 is the only one who has access to hotkeys like return to menu or open the menu. So if you're not careful, you can cause issues where you accidentally set the wrong device, and you can kinda get locked out. Though again, none of these settings save, so you can just restart the device, but it's still annoying and probably my biggest gripe with multiplayer on anything Batocera-like. Additionally, emulators that don't run in RetroArch such as DS and PSP may not work with your Bluetooth controller, but most of these have options or settings that you can use to get these working. But even as frustrating and limiting as all these feel to me, if you just want to play older titles, or even support master stuff on your screen with one or even multiple Bluetooth controllers, as long as you keep these limitations in mind, it should still work out pretty well. Again, if you're not trying to mix Bluetooth and USB controllers, just connect the Bluetooth controllers in the right order and it should work out just fine. The first one will be player 1. Alright, so let's wrap this up. This is most definitely a novelty device. The screen ratio and ergonomics are definitely meant to invoke that classic GBA feel, and I think it will make for a great conversation starter too. Its sharp and bright IPS display is designed for GBA games, but other consoles still look good on it too. And while most of its nice modern features are also offered on other handhelds, I'd argue what makes this one stand out is actually its button layout. Nintendo and most other companies have switched to a diamond layout. It just seems optimal when you're dealing with 4 face buttons. But the Game Boy system's pretty much always stuck with this slightly offset design, even dating back to the original Game Boy. So as odd as this looks today, I really appreciate that Anbernic brought this back. Even the Nintendo DS and even some GBA clone consoles that played GBA carts dropped this in favor of the more modern look, so it's really cool to see this classic feel return. I know I've been a little hard on this console, and while I still think a modded GBA with a flash cart is the #1 best way to play GBA games, if you're looking for convenience, modern features, and a significantly lower price point, I still think this Anbernic is a really good choice. It's cheaper than some unmodded GBAs, and gives a pretty good balance of retro aesthetics with modern features, so I can definitely see myself using this more and taking it with me way more often than my premium systems. But I can also see why some people just don't really need something that looks like a classic GBA and would opt for other models. It's really just for someone who wants this unique fusion of modern and retro. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!